So this video is to give you the quickest way to start using ACES. ACES, you'll see it up here in your viewport, sRGB ACES. And this is the Academy Color Encoding System. Let's do a quick render here. I've got a light, I've got a plane. There we go. That light might be a little crazy bright. There we go. So generally, you've got to do a couple things to use this effectively. I'm going to close this here. This is the material that's on this plane. I'm going to map an image or put a file. To the base color. And for right now, I'm going to use this Macbeth texture. This is a common color checking chart that you'll see a lot. It's called the Macbeth chart. So the main thing you have to do is make sure that your color space is set correctly. And with ACES, you're going to have this gigantic list. And really, there's just two that we're going to use. Anything that goes to a base color, you can see how dispiriting this is to have to scroll through this list, is this utility sRGB texture. And usually what I do, because it's going to warn me every time down here, is I say, ignore that. This is what I want to use. And I'm going to connect it here. And if I do a render, I get this. And if I want to check, which I think I do, let's just check that image. So this is it just in the Windows viewer. And this is the image on here. And there's some gradation because of the lighting, but this matches, these two match. So that's what you do for a base color. So before you start worrying about this too much, I'm going to put a script in the description for this video, because it's just so much easier to me to just grab this, and I've got it up here, and say sRGB. And then it'll change it and turn this on for you. So everything else that you're likely to connect here has a different setting. So for instance, I'm going to load a different file. And I'm going to load a normal map. Just some weird bumpy texture. So everything else is going to have this sRGB linear. And why don't I just try this? And it'll change it to utility linear sRGB. It'll turn this on, and then you're ready to connect it. So I'll put a normal. And there we go. So let me stop this for a minute. If you want to add a light, I'm going to hide this light here. And if you want to add an HDR globe light or a skydome light, so a pretty common thing to do, I'm going to map a file here. And the file I want to put here, I'm going to grab one of the either EXR or HDRs, this type of file. So this is also that linear. And so since I've got it selected, it's highlighted here. I could select it this way. I can just run this linear script, and I'll put that in the description too. And now it's all set correctly, and I can render using that background as an image. So one thing to note, this looks great. I'm going to save this as an EXR, and I'll call it render EXR. And I'm going to show you what happens if I go to load this in Photoshop, so I got Photoshop kind of open over to the side here. I'll open the EXR, and Photoshop, you can see this doesn't really look right. This is my Photoshop image. This looks kind of washed out, and usually it's going to be way over bright. Photoshop is not going to be able to open these EXRs correctly. So let me close that. If I save image, let's try render.png. And let's open in Photoshop. Photoshop will open a PNG correctly. That's ACES color. So, but typically, if you're rendering on a Maya in 3D, you're pretty much always going to render an EXR. So really, the way to view the EXRs is in Nuke. And even if you don't use Nuke much, you can just start it up. There's only a couple things to remember. I'm going to hit R for read. So Nuke works on read and write. So R for read. I'm going to open up that EXR. I'll hit 1 so it shows up in the window. And initially, it's going to look kind of wrong too. In Nuke, we need to tell it, use the OpenColor ACES system. So with nothing selected here, I'm going to hit S for settings, and the settings travel with each individual file. So the project settings, color, I'm going to change it to this OpenColor, which is the ACES. So, and now it's going to read correctly. So once you've got it read in there and you've got your settings set so that's OpenColor, I'm going to hit W for write. So Nuke does read and write. I'll just connect that back to my file. So this is typically what I do. Is I'm going to give it a file name, .mov. So I've got a sequence of EXRs that I rendered out of Maya for an animation. You've got a couple things to adjust here. Codec, I almost always use this ProRes 422. That's not right or wrong, it's just what I use. And you do have to change this color space because the gamma is a little wrong here. And we're going to use this utility sRGB, which is the same thing we used in Maya. So you can do this, you can hit render, it's right here. And it'll tell you, ask you how many frames. In spite of that error, it'll work. And then you've got a movie file that you can pull into Premiere and edit with sound and whatnot from there. And so that's how you use ACES in Maya.